Transportation is often an overlooked factor when it comes to a vacation, to a theme park, or anywhere for that matter. But it should absolutely be factored in to any decision as it pertains to where you're going to stay on your vacation. Thank you so much for joining me wherever you're at, on the couch, on the TV, on your phone, on the computer, on the tablet, on your game system. Thank you. I appreciate it so much. Hey, by the way, give me a like, maybe a subscribe, comment. That helps with the algorithm. All right, let's get into it. You figured out how you're going to get to the airport? Well, that really depends on what airport you're flying to, right? For a lot of you, that's pretty simple. Jump on a train, a subway, or take an Uber. I'd say for the majority of Americans who live in cities, this isn't that big of a factor. But for a lot of other people that maybe live in middle America, don't have the luxury of public transportation, at least not in the way that you would experience it in a more urban environment, this is a factor. You have to figure out how you're going to get to the airport. Oftentimes, you're talking a couple hours away. That's typically the case for me. Most of the larger airports, for me, are at least 2 hours plus away. Now, there is one within an hour of me that is an international airport that is about a moderate size airport, but the flights are pretty limited and you're kind of restricted as far as dates, times, things like that. Whereas I could drive to Philadelphia, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Washington, D.C., and have all kinds of options. So it's something that I factor in every time I make a decision on where I'm flying to or flying from. Anyways, let's talk about the transportation. Typically, you're going to drive to an airport. If you live in a city, again, that's a more urban environment. That's a different thing. But for the majority of the rest of us, we're driving to the airport. And in my particular case, I may have to drive an hour or 2 hours. And one airport that I've flown out of, 3 hours. It makes sense sometimes, believe me. Let's understand some of the ins and outs of that. Sometimes an airport can price you out because of how much they charge you for parking. That's absolutely something you should factor in. For example, there is a more rural airport roughly 2 hours away from me. Parking is completely free. There's another airport. It's not really rural, fairly rural. It is also free. There's another airport within 2.5 hours of me where parking is like $5 a day. There's another airport, a major airport nationally, that is over 2 hours, about 2.5 hours away from me, where parking is typically going to be $20+ a day. And there's all kinds of ranges there. Some airports charge you $30 a day to park your own vehicle, depending on where you're parking and what options you're using. And God forbid you have an EV that you have to charge and have sit there for a few days. Sometimes you can get a deal on those places where you're parking with an EV, but most of the time you don't. Try parking in Pittsburgh sometime. Sometimes the lots fill up and you're screwed and you get locked into a certain rate. So anyways, you've got to factor in all these things. That is just in the way of the airport. On the way from an airport, let's say Orlando, MCO, you've got to figure out what your transportation is going to be, and you have a number of options there at varying ranges. I mean, if you're driving, none of this matters to you. This is a different qualification altogether. So if you're driving, that's another part of the transportation equation that I can't even get into, because that really is heavily dependent on where you are coming from. If you are coming from, the Midwest, your gas, your time, that's all equations very similar to what I deal with coming from Pennsylvania. But if you're coming from somewhere like Seattle or, Southern California or Central California, Northern California, Utah, I mean, this is a different conversation altogether. You have an entirely different set of rules you have to follow there. But you really should figure out what your gas is going to cost you on that trip. That is part of this equation as well. And then you should weigh that against another type of currency that you don't put in your wallet. And that currency is utility, time, and personal value. Time, of course, is obvious. The amount of time that you lose driving as opposed to flying. And personal capital, what you assign to that time, your own personal utility. Do you mind driving like that? Or do you prefer flying and not having to deal with all that traffic? That's up to you. Only you can quantify that. So let's get into when you land at a place like Orlando. There is a bus service that Mears, I won't list it because, I'm not giving them free advertising, but there is a bus service that Mears in Orlando will sell you. It's about $30-ish a person both ways, so 30 there and 30 back to the airport. You schedule that, you pre-purchase that, and again, that is for everyone in your family. It is located in the airport, so you go down to the transportation part of your terminal, and then you can get the buses from there. They do different routes. It can take different amounts of time. Most of the basic routes, the $30-ish version of that, services multiple resorts, 4 or 5, sometimes 6 resorts or more. And so you will be on that bus depending on what resort you're going to for an extended period of time. If, say, you're going to Pop Century at Disney, it's usually one of the first stops. So keep that in mind. Art of Animation, Pop Century, early stops. There are different levels to that. Mears actually sells upgraded packages, even like more personal vans with a smaller capacity, so you get to your resort quicker. So I would encourage you to look over that. There's Rideshare, Uber, Lyft. I don't know a lot about those things because I've never taken an Uber or a Lyft in my life. I've never been comfortable with it. It's just not in my wheelhouse. But I know the prices, and they're not cheap in Orlando, specifically from the airport to your resort. So again, it depends where you're going and what you're doing and how you view all of those services, those transportation services. So my point is, there are tools out there for you to look over all these things. From the gas standpoint, if you're driving, there is a really good government website where you put in your car type, your make, your model, and where you're leaving and where you're going, and it will average out about what you're going to pay for gas on your way there and way back. The Mears service, you can hop on there and game plan out how much it's going to cost you. All the different levels. The rideshare, there are apps out there that actually will game that out. Rideshare is typically going to be different based on the time of year you go, the time of day you go, the traffic, all those types of factors. What does that leave us? Rental cars. You can rent cars for different prices, all kinds of different options, it's like a big market. So all you have to do when it comes to that, hop on their website or hop on Priceline or Google and look up your projected pricing. There's some details there. For example, what kind of car you're using, what service you're using, what time of year you're going, availability of certain types of cars, the amount of time that you're spending there. All those things factor in. A good money saving tip when it comes to rental cars is pick the manager's special, particularly on Priceline or one of those aggregate sites. So here's the other thing. When you do a search on one of those sites, they're going to give you some really, really cheap rates. And when you dig into some of those cheap rates, it comes crashing down because a lot of those car rental agencies are not at the airport. You have to take a shuttle to them. And here's the trick with them. Take a look at the reviews of those particular car rental agencies. Almost all of them have a large amount of complaints for the amount of time that you're waiting in their office for them to do the paperwork or whatever else they're doing. This is on purpose because they're trying to frustrate you so that they can upsell you. They can make you just be so frustrated that you're just saying, yeah, whatever, to add that option. You just want to get the heck out of that, right? I avoid them like the plague because by the time it's all said and done, and you will see that in the reviews of those off-site rental car companies, you will see that you typically are paying more, if not the same, as the on-airport rental car companies. The other thing is the rental car companies on airport do whatever you can to get the fast track, fast pass, fast lane, whatever they call it, version of your car rental. That will basically put you in the garage and you won't have to fool around in the terminal, which if you have to go to the desk at the terminal, sometimes that can take an hour or longer. Trust me, I know. Okay, so sometimes that can be more expensive, sometimes that can be cheaper than your other options. Typically it's going to be a little more expensive, but it adds some convenience for you. Now, the other part of that is you then need to look at what that's going to cost you at your hotel. Most hotels in Orlando, outside of the Disney hotels, will charge you a parking rate per day, per night. And that can get expensive. $30 or more is typically what they're running nowadays. You can actually search for hotels that offer free parking when you use the aggregate sites. And that applies to people that are driving from home as well. A big advantage to Disney, staying at Disney, is that has to factor in to your hotel price, and nobody typically does that. They don't look at that. per day. $30 per day can add up very quickly. If you're staying off site and you're not an annual pass holder, here's another thing you need to be thinking about. If you're a non-pass holder and you are going to stay off property, you're going to pay parking at the Walt Disney World Resort or the Universal Resort. And actually, even if you stay on property at Universal and you're using the parking garage, you're going to pay parking. Doesn't matter whether you have tickets for the theme parks or not there. For Disney, if you stay on property, you get free parking at the theme parks if you have a ticket. If you have a pass, you're a credit pass holder, and some of the other options for passes vary, but specifically in credit pass, you get free unlimited parking at the parks for when you're going there. Okay, so these are all things that you have to factor into your budget, into your decision for when you decide to go, for when you decide to stay. Transportation is the one thing that most people don't even think about or consider. Here is one more consideration. How are you going to get from your hotel to the park? If you stay at a Disney resort and you're going to Walt Disney World, no problem. They have a bus system, or they have a monorail, or they have the Skyliner. They will get you to the parks. If you stay at a non-Disney owned hotel, that question becomes a lot more nuanced, because non-Disney resorts have different levels of transportation. Most don't have any at all. The ones that do, they're scheduled, they're limited, you have to have tickets, sometimes they're complimentary, sometimes they're not. It's all in the fine print of that hotel. You need to look that up before you decide to stay somewhere. We'll get into more of the hotel thing tomorrow, because that's what we'll be covering. Spoiler alert there. Universal. Staying at a Universal hotel, they have their own bus system. Getting to a Universal hotel from Disney requires rideshare, rental car, or your own transportation. You're on your own there. Same thing when it comes to Disney going to Universal. You're on your own, and there's always old school taxis as well. So these are your options. By the way, Mears also runs a shuttle from the airport to Universal hotels. I've seen it before in the $50 range per person. I've seen it in the $30 range, which is kind of weird because Universal is really close to MCO as opposed to Disney, which is all spread out. So, in any case, that's a little rundown of the transportation issues, and why you really need to understand what you're going to be paying when it comes to getting around at any of those places once you land on the ground, plus getting to the airport itself. All right, so that'll do it for today. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening, for joining me. Dreams, grass, and churros. We'll see you tomorrow.